All right, welcome everybody. Good morning. I'm Peter Cowan, Managing Director of Sutton Capital Partners. Welcome to our launch of our weekly series on the mindset of an investor today. We're very fortunate to have Tim Draper with us, one of the leading venture capitalists in the world. I hope all of you are safe and optimistic that we'll get through this crazy time sooner than later. We plan to talk to Tim for about 30 minutes, then have 10 minutes of a Q&A. Please send your questions through the Q&A tab on the toolbar at the bottom of your page, and we'll try to answer as many of them as we can. Hey, Tim, welcome. Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure. And I like to say, stay brave and stay free. Everybody's saying, stay safe to me, and I'm thinking, God, I'm already locked in my house. I don't think I can get any safer. I'd like to get out, and I'd like to take a few risks. I like to be brave, and I'd like to be free. I'd like to get out and do stuff. So let's get doing that.
Well, good. I'm with you on that. So let me start off with, most people know you as, one of the top VCs and investments in Twitter, Skype, Twitch, Tesla, Baidu, Hotmail, Coinbase, Theranos, Robinhood, and a bunch of others, and the first VC to invest in China. Is there anything else you'd like people to know about you that most people do not?
Well, yeah, I wrote a book. It's called How to Be the Startup Hero. And I wrote it because I've been traveling all around the world, and these plane rides are pretty long. And so I just pull out my iPhone. I wrote the whole thing on my iPhone. Anyway, it's available on Amazon. It's great. I wrote it really for the students at Draper University because as I was talking with them, I was starting to repeat myself, and I realized that some of these things are just fundamental, and people should hear them. And the first 2/3 of the book are stories that are relevant to the pledge. We have a pledge. I will promote freedom at all costs, and I will fail and fail again until I succeed. Explore the world with gusto and enthusiasm. Anyway, there's the first 2/3 of the book are that, and then the last part of the book is, okay, so you really want to be an entrepreneur, you've read this far, here are some tips for an entrepreneur. So the last third of it is just like, here's what you should do. Take care of your customer. Pretty simple things.
Good. Well,
anyway, yeah, so I'm an author. I also wrote a song called The Risk Master and another one called the Bitcoin Hustle. And they're both really fun.
I'm glad that, thank you. So in this environment, we're going to talk to you about a bunch of macro questions and your opinion on them and some of the things you're doing, but tell us what's your schedule like today? How's it changed? What's a typical day for you?
Okay, well, I can give you my schedule. I got up, I had a call from somebody in Dubai, and then I had a meeting with the Belarus foreign minister because he's trying to figure out what to do with Belarus and in this new environment, not just COVID, but like, hey, how do we become a freer country, and all the small and medium-sized businesses are doing really well, and they don't need government support, and they like that. They want more of those. I'm doing this webinar. I have about, I think, several entrepreneurs I'm talking with, potential investor. Somebody wants to do a documentary about me. I'm meeting with about 15 entrepreneurs in the afternoon. So all that on Zoom. There's my day. It's pretty much, I get dressed up, I kiss my wife goodbye, I come to my home office where you see me now, and then at the end of the day, I say, honey, I'm home. And so I try not to make this any different from another work day. In some ways it's more efficient, in some ways it's just driving me totally nuts.
Yeah, no, I think we're getting a lot of people talking about some things they like about the efficiency, but how it's driving a lot of people crazy. So let's talk about the landscape and what's gone on. You're obviously talking to a number of entrepreneurs. You're still in touch. You're doing it by Zoom. In your view, how's the landscape changed in the last 8 weeks? And how do you see it going forward in the short term?
Okay, so last 8 weeks, here's what's happened. I've talked to many of our entrepreneurs, and some of them have had huge acceleration in their business because of COVID, because people have been trapped in place. They've done things like, hey, try this VR headset, try using remote healthcare, or use data for healthcare, or try Bitcoin. Let's get a Bitcoin wallet and see how easy it is to move money around with Bitcoin. And so some of our companies are doing incredibly well in this environment because they were pushing. And during a bull market, everybody goes, oh, there's nothing wrong. Why should I try anything new? During a crisis, they say, whoa, I got to think for myself here. I got to try something new. What's going on out there? And this is the opportunity for a lot of these companies to kind of accelerate. The other companies that are more, that require a lot of capital to get going, that are in more traditional fields or in any way connected with travel or hotels, are really hurting, and they've been crushed. Their businesses have gone from, whatever, growing 50% a year or 50% a month and dropping to zero. And while that may be fine for Google, Apple, Facebook, that is not fine for a startup. They have, if government wanted to crush small businesses throughout the country, they did it. That's exactly what they did. They crushed them. And then they've got this loan thing. It's gone through the bureaucratic snake. It's like a snake eating a rat. The rat kind of moves through the body and eventually comes out the other end and gets to the private sector. It's the government has put up all sorts of barriers to get the money that the feds have decided to print, and a lot of people don't qualify, and a lot of businesses do, and you don't know whether one works or one doesn't. It's not fair in any way. There's favoritism, and there's if you have venture capital money and the venture capitalist has certain rights, you cannot get the money. And what's that about? Where'd that come from? It's like, are you trying to support the economy, or are you just supporting your favoritism in the economy? Anyway, I think that was a disaster. And so it has been bimodal. It's gone, some have done extraordinarily well during this time. Some have just been crushed. And the ones that have been crushed, some are qualified, but in order to qualify, they need to hire lawyers and accountants and whatever else. And the ones who don't qualify, they're kind of wondering, what was this all about?
So my question,
I think that going forward, you've got, first of all, half the people are saying, hey, I like being home. I like working through Zoom. I think it's very efficient and effective. And the other half are saying, I want to get out of here. I want to get to the office. And so commercial real estate will have half the demand. That is not going to be good for commercial real estate. Travel, I think, once people come to their senses, they'll start traveling again. But I think it'll be a little less than before, because the people who are just breaking their necks going, 8 times a year to China are going to say, well, why don't we take half of those or 3/4 of those with Zoom calls? And so business travel will be off. But I think, once people realize that, sure, it hit New York hard, but it was a flu. What did we just do? As soon as they realize, what did we just do? and they get back to it, I think travel will pick up again. I think hotels are going to pick up again once San Francisco comes to their senses. I mean, San Francisco made it so nobody could go stay in the hotels except the homeless. And then they fed them drugs and alcohol and tobacco in the home. I mean, what is going on? Where are incentives? I mean, the key to a great world is to have leaders provide great incentives for people to be free and produce and do great things.
Hey, Tim,
Now,
Tim, let me jump in, because
okay.
I thank you, by the way, and I know as a libertarian you've got strong.
Hey, don't label me. Label yourself. Hey, I vote Democrat. I vote Republican. I vote Libertarian. I vote freedom. You know, I'm looking toward a world that's decentralized. I want that world. I don't want to be tribal anymore. I want those borders gone. Anyway, go on.
So good. So my question is, and I think you're giving us context on how you evaluate these things, is you've got a series of companies that are thriving. You've got some companies that were doing well, required capital. We all know that the government is what the government is. So things, as you say, is a rat going through a snake. It won't be efficient. It won't be effective. It probably isn't fair. As you evaluate the companies and the deals, you've got a host of portfolio companies. Some of them don't need your help. Some may die. Some, your help could be the difference between surviving for the short term and not. How do you divide your time? How do you make your decisions? And can you share with us some decisions that you've wrestled with?
Well, we've been a little lucky because for the last year, I was thinking the market was pretty heated up. And I was telling all of my entrepreneurs to raise as much money as you can, just don't spend it. And many of them took that advice. So we haven't had as much shoring up and triage as we used to, or as we did in the dot-com bubble or whatever. But the ones we have seen, the advice I've been saying is, look, figure out if the venture, if the venture capitalist goes away, if all the venture capitalists go away, what do you have? And what that means is, company, don't look at the venture capitalist as your customer. Look at your customer as your customer. Get your money from your customers. If you are providing a service that's valuable, your customer will pay. And so it is time now to raise money from your customer. It's time to grow organically. There may be a temporary blip here where the market just popped right back. I don't know if that's going to stick. I'm smelling inflation. $8 trillion was printed. I'm feeling like we're going to see some serious inflation. That's usually not good at all for the stock market. And it also means that capital is going to be tougher and tougher to come by. The companies that are operating in Bitcoin they're not going to be affected by that because there's no inflation in Bitcoin. They have just 21 million of them, that's it. But if you're subject to the whims of some political force and they're printing money willy-nilly, you are going to have inflation down the road, and that is not going to be good for your stock market. And if it's not good for the stock market, it's very unlikely that people will risk their capital on your business. And so you've got to think 2-3 years out, how do I survive for these 3 years? Maybe you can pull together some money right now and then figure out, and if your team's too top heavy, you're going to have to cut it back. This is one of those times where if you're an entrepreneur, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is when you really have to show your true self. If you're a true entrepreneur, you're going to make it through this with flying colors. If you are a kind of wannabe entrepreneur or just doing it for the money, it's not going to work out for you. This is going to be tough.
So the question is, and I think this is exactly the segue I was hoping for, is you're talking to a bunch of entrepreneurs, a number of them every day, and the ones that you've entrusted, where you've invested, you've advised, you might have been with them multiple times, you're sitting there with which is your most valuable asset, your time and energy and focus, plus capital that you have to decide, do I invest in this? Do I triage that? Do I let this go? Can you give us some criteria or an example of what you look for the ones that you might want to save? You hinted, you talked about a 2 to 3 year runway. What's your filter now as you evaluate what you've got to make as you've got to look at a lot of companies to make some tough choices?
Well, the Series A-like companies from last year are being valued like seed companies from last year. So Series A, the new Series A is seed pricing. And so we're looking at that and saying, it's going to be tougher and tougher to fund a seed business because we can get Series A kinds of companies at the same valuation. So that's a difficult thing for people to swallow. So starting a new business, it's got to be a revolutionary business. It's got to be extraordinarily new and something we've never seen before, and something with the entrepreneurs completely dedicated before we'll do a seed investment, because the valuations have come down so far. The Series A is the ones we're looking at. We're saying, well, look, how responsible have they been, and will they be with their money? Is this sustainable? Does it look like the customers are coming in and ready to buy? We're in the late stages. Those are companies that we're just saying, hey, do you have a pretty clear path to profitability? And then if it's, I don't want to deter anybody who has totally dedicated their life to something and they want to see it through. Those are the people we want to back anyway, no matter what. I want to send a pretty strong message that the valuations have come down, at least at the in the venture business. They have not necessarily come down in the public markets, but the venture business really has, because a lot of venture capitalists are spending all their time triaging and fighting fires with their existing portfolio, so they're not really willing to look at something new. We uniquely actually are looking at new things, and that I think puts us in a very strong position. Can you share
with us any unique companies that, and this in the sector, or what captured about that for you? That, because I think what you said, which I think is quite a comment, is the new Series A is seed pricing. So for something to come along new, it has to really grab you. Can you share with us an example of something that really caught you?
Well, I have a worldview that's very much decentralized, open, transparent, global, where geographic borders mean less and less, and governments compete with one another for us. That is my global view. If you've got a business that's moving in that direction, whether you've got insurance, you're putting insurance on the blockchain with smart contracts and AI, and using surveillance to determine whether there's fraud, or you're creating something around real estate where you're tokenizing real estate, or you're creating a way to do title. If you are making it so Bitcoin can be accounted for, like you're tying an accounting package to Bitcoin and the blockchain, I think that's a huge opportunity. If you are creating a system of waterfalls for businesses to operate in, I think that's going to be incredibly valuable, where it's where everybody's just operating with a wallet, a Bitcoin wallet, and the money as it flows, it finds the wallet it's supposed to find. If you're using AI for therapeutics, we're really excited about that, because I think data around therapeutics is going to be a big deal, where you use computational biochemistry to determine where you put a disease up here, you run many drugs against it, and then you see one that catches, and you can, on the screen, determine efficacy and safety better than even the FDA can. Those are going to be some very interesting places. If you're talking about diagnostics, we think data on diagnostics is going to be a big deal too. So I think for healthcare, I think healthcare is about to go through a major transformation. I'm still a believer in these individual vehicles and new forms of transportation. I sort of feel like Tesla broke the logjam, and all of a sudden, there are all sorts of new creative people creating flying cars and helicopter car boats, and you name it. And I think that some of those are going to be really important moving forward. Whether we're stuck being 6 feet away from each other, or just we want mass transit that moves a lot of people very quickly. We have a company called SkyTran that does that without requiring much energy at all, which is really interesting. I think that travel might change, and so somebody might have a really interesting idea out there for travel, and it might have a big impact on the world. So some of the biggest industries in the world. Oh, and if you've got, we've backed Aragon for doing jury trials. These are tokens. Aragon for doing jury trials. Unstoppable for free speech, global free speech. Back Bitcoin because it's global currency. Tezos, it's a new form of global governance. Those kinds of things are very interesting to me and to our team. We think that we can help drive to that new utopian world, while a lot of people are fighting to keep it dystopian and keeping tribalism alive. We think that banks are going to be a relic of the past. We think that you're going to want your money in something like this, or working for you, but through the crypto world, and not working for the guys who wear the fancy suits like this and live in the fancy buildings that say B of A or Citibank or Chase on them. We're basically, let's face it, we're supporting all those fancy banks, all those people in the fancy suits. It's a little like when I went to Las Vegas and my kids said, "Oh, we're going to make so much money." And I said, "You see all these buildings? All these buildings were built on the backs of people like you who said you were going to make money when you got to Las Vegas."
Yeah, you like the odds better outside of Vegas. I think that's
the banks are the house right now, and suddenly there's a crypto world that is operating outside the house.
So, all right. So I love it's a real treat for us to hear your vision on what you're doing. I want to take a step back, because we got about 5 more minutes before we have other Q&A. A bunch of people have had companies that have had investments. As you say, seed is the new Series A. That'll require some companies that have taken an investment to have a down round. to deal with that reality. Never easy. You've been through all these scenarios. Perhaps in this environment, that's less of a stigma, but sometimes it's messy. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, a lot of thoughts. First, take the money, but also cut your team back too. Make a sacrifice and then take the money. But make the deal one where you can live with it. If you're the entrepreneur and somebody puts a 3 times liquidation preference on top of everybody else, it's not healthy. You're going to start looking at this as just a job, because there's no way you're going to figure you're going to get over all those hurdles before the common shares get anything. I think I would renegotiate with everybody, and before I'd give some, $10 million investment a 3 times liquidation preference, because all of a sudden you've got 30 million you've got to overcome before you pay yourselves anything. So your incentives are just to increase your salary and your bonus. I would make sure that every time you raise money, you align the best you can with the investors and with your team, and make sure that it works out. And even if that means, they're paying a very low price for the stock, and you thought you were worth 10 million and now you're worth 300,000 or whatever, I wouldn't even think about that. I'd think, how do I make this business successful? Because if it's a huge success, it won't matter if you own 2% or 80% of the business. You're going to be super wealthy and happy and healthy, and it's going to be fine. So I would just make sure that you don't do anything that provides a bad incentive for you or for your people or even for your investor. Make sure the incentives are all aligned toward the success of your business. A lot of people just don't do that. They think, I'll get 3 times liquidation preference even on the downside here. And they're making a big mistake. And let a bunch of people go, or whatever, let some people go, and then fire up the remaining people into this new world, into this new company that you're building. Get them excited about this new thing. We have capital. We know we can live for a long time because there are fewer of us. All those things start feeling better, and do a lot of these company meetings. That communications turns out to be very important during a time where there's a shock to the system.
No, that's very good advice about all the different participants, including the past stakeholders. And I'm hearing you say, and I hadn't heard of this before, but you're saying some of the investors are not only coming up with reduced valuations, but more onerous terms than what we've seen, as far as 3 times preference, and it doesn't surprise me we're seeing that. So we have a couple of more minutes before we've got a whole slew of questions. By the way, a bunch of them brought on as you talked about the different areas that excited you. But I have a question. Would you invest in somebody who you've only met through Zoom, not face-to-face? So we're not talking about previous people you met. Do you think that can become the new norm in the short term or not?
I've done it already, so the answer is yes. But I feel like Zoom gives me about, way back when we were doing Pitch Tim Draper on Your $1 billion idea competition, and that was when Skype had just come out and everything was a little fuzzy and uncertain, and you couldn't really tell what somebody was saying or thinking or whatever. Now Zoom, you're getting a larger percentage of the information through Zoom. You can see somebody twitch, you can catch certain things, but it's hard to understand a person's energy, their strength, and a big part of backing someone is, do they have the inner strength that will attract other people to their business, that will convince customers to come on board? Now, a big part of getting customers is going to be Zoom in the future. So if they do well on Zoom, or then that's actually an asset. But there is something to when you meet them and you feel them, and you know, there's a dynamic, and it's an aura or an energy or a something that you don't pick up at all through a video. And I think it is something that we will miss. And if I only were to invest this way, I think I might miss some things. I might be able to see more because I can get through more Zoom meetings than I do through face-to-face. But I don't believe my judgment will be quite as good.
So why would, if you're going to make a big investment and you're going to go into somebody, especially with all the alternatives you have, why wouldn't you socially distance and have them come to you and be 6 feet apart as a final discussion?
Well, a lot of people aren't even getting on planes, and most of them, I've got 60% US and 40% rest of world. You know, anybody who watches the news has given up a part of their brain to the news, and they feel like they can't get on an airplane. I don't agree with that, but I would get on an airplane. I sort of feel like yeah, I think they'd be better off if I saw them in person, but they're probably getting 80% the way they're on Zoom.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. Well, you've provoked a number of different questions, so let me share some from the audience here. And one of the questions is, what do you see as the future of retail?
It's a good question, and I think there will be entrepreneurs that will create the future of retail. I don't believe it's keep people 6 feet away from each other. I think people are going to be hugging and kissing very soon. As soon as they realize that the numbers really aren't, except maybe New York City, the numbers aren't nearly as bad as all those people were talking. They're going to say, well, wait, this was just like the flu. What changed? And so I think this 6 feet thing is an imposition. For a free country to force it, I think will be very difficult, and I think they should back off. So I think retail has a future. I think restaurant, it might be like the perfect time to start a retailer. Might be the perfect time to start a restaurant. It's a weird time. You know that there are whatever millions of restaurants that have been put out of business from this reaction to the virus, and there are and millions of retailers have been put out of business for the same reason, and some big ones. I mean, you're hearing Neiman Marcus is going away, and I think that means that there will be some new ways of looking at retail. Think about the things that kind of bugged you about retail. I think a good retailer is going to come in there and sort of reinvent it, make it nicer for you. The way Apple reinvented retail for the computers. I think other people will come in and kind of go, people don't like this or that or whatever. Let's try to reinvent something that. Let's make it different, nicer, surprise people.
All right, thank you. So Alone asks, and he's an entrepreneur that's gotten funding and now he's going out for more funding. And he says, comes to you and says, how about a runway? If I come to you with 12 months or 18 months, does that give you or an investor comfort, or do I need more? Or what do your instincts tell you?
My instincts tell me that we need 3 years. Now, that doesn't mean you have to have the whole thing right up front. If you have 18 months, you can probably spend 6 months raising some of the rest of it while you build your business. But I don't think we're going to come out of this unscathed. I think we're going to have trouble. And that trouble will probably come from the from the virus that shut down all these businesses, that left us with 36 million in the US unemployed and probably 10 times that globally. And all that unemployment and all that, and then the forced government subsidies are going to create inflation. That inflation then will drive the stock markets down, which means that money won't be as easy to come by, and it'll be tougher to raise. So I'm thinking, and then that whole process will probably take 2 years. And then coming out of it is going to require entrepreneurs like you guys to create all the net new jobs. Now, okay, that's the downside. The good side is, whereas we had almost full employment going into this virus, now we got 36 million unemployed. That is a great opportunity for somebody. I mean, just as Uber kind of capitalized on the gig economy, I mean, we've got a gig economy times 50. And there is probably a really interesting business and neat opportunity out there for some entrepreneur who can sort of hire people to do things temporarily, TaskRabbit, whatever. But we got to get 36 million people back to employed, and it'll be great entrepreneurs like you guys who do that. And I think that's 3-4 years out before we get back to any kind of full employment or even close.
Very good, thank you. So let's talk about what you've talked about here, which is the economy is going to get ugly. There's potential for inflation that's going to hurt the stock market. How about the LPs for the venture funds and the future of venture? Are they going to look up and say, we're not worried about funds like yours or Sequoia, they will have money, but there's been a proliferation of funds. A number of them are going to be hurt in the next short while. They're going to probably have trouble getting money. What do you think is going to happen to the venture industry in general?
Yeah, I think a lot of the new venture capitalists are going to have to go find something else to do, because I have noticed the LPs are frozen in their tracks, or they're saying all we're doing is we're just supporting our existing guys. And what that does is it makes it much tougher for the venture capitalists. Now, could be tied to timing. You just raised a fund and you're new in the venture business, you're in good shape. You can take your time, don't hurry, don't get that money out too fast. But you may be fine. But if you're at the tail end of a fund and you're thinking you're going to raise another one, the LP world has changed. I actually think that there is a new model that maybe other venture capitalists should start thinking about, and I'm not sure what that model is. I've been experimenting with some things myself, some SPVs, some various platforms, various other kinds of things, because I do know that it's going through a transformation, and I want to make sure that Draper Associates is on top of that and ahead of it. So I think there may be some weird form of consolidation. There are a lot of things that could happen to venture capital, but a venture capitalist who's out of money now and trying to go out and raise money may be better off starting a business and hiring 36 million people
Yeah.
to work
Okay.
for them.
So last question here, and it comes back to one of the themes you talked about in a couple of different ways, and that's AI. And big buzzword, a lot of people talking about it, a lot of companies doing some impressive stuff globally, a lot of people doing it. Obviously, you get a great view with not only you, but all the other Draper companies that you get to see. Is there some criteria within AI, within a niche, that helps you separate this is real versus not? Because so much of it is intangible, unproven, and breakthroughs. What makes you decide one company and not another?
Yeah, I'm usually not thinking real or not, because when they pitch me on it, it's not real yet anyway.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So I'm kind of thinking 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, can I imagine this future?
Yes.
That's how I usually do most of my thinking. And with AI, I do think that it's going to take not all of our jobs, but all of the mundane tasks of our jobs. And our jobs are going to get more abstract, more creative, more interesting. And the monotonous things are going to be done by AI. And AI is getting better and better and better. You know, I've been hearing about artificial intelligence since I was an electrical engineer. And I was there at Stanford in 1980. And they were still talking about it. So this has been, 40 years in the making. But now there is enough data out there so that computers can actually learn. They can do some deep learning. They can make decisions that are based on expert systems, putting different rules on there, and then adapting those rules, continually changing those rules to perfect AI. I think AI is going to be used in healthcare very soon. It's already really proving itself to be better than the doctor-patient Q&A. And I think it's going to be there, ideally it sweeps through all the professions. It's there in driving. I've been in a self-driving car and it was pretty good. Now, it's not as good as somebody human driving, but it's pretty good. And I think you give it a little more time and it's going to be better than a human. And then, as some press guy offered me the question, he said, well, how long before all the cars on the, how long before we have autonomous cars on the road? And I said, well, we already have some, but it'll be a couple of years before we start seeing them regularly. And then he said, how long before humans are no longer allowed to drive?
Hey, Tim.
That'll be when the AI does a better job of driving than the human.
Yeah, and it's proven. I think we're probably closer than you think.
Yeah.
Tim, thank you very much for your time, your thoughts. Always a treat. I hope we can sit down and break bread face to face sooner than later. Always love hearing your optimistic view and your candor. Thank you again.
Good, my pleasure. I'm Tim at draper.vc. Only send me business plans. Thank you.
Good. So anyway, thank you, Tim. We want to thank you, and we want to thank a couple of things. We want to thank SAS Brief, our partner online, an online newsletter for entrepreneurs. They've been very helpful. There'll be a recording of this. We'll send to all of you and a link to that in the next few days. Please join us next Wednesday, 10 a.m. Pacific time with Mark Mullen, co-founder of Bonfire Ventures, one of the leading SaaS early stage venture funds, about what he's seeing with his portfolios. Like many of you, we're disappointed to have canceled our recurring revenue conference this spring. We're planning to do a virtual summit and hope to resume our in-person event in spring 2021. We welcome all feedback, good and bad, and look forward to keeping you at the pulse of the technology investing marketplace. Tim, thanks again. Take care.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you, Nancy.
Bye-bye.
Great fun.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.